Hey, street credibility, the PhD in street cred. So, some folks wonder why I speak to pollution how I do. What gives me some authority? So, I graduated high school, went in the service, went to Paris Island for boot camp for 3 months, got done with that, and went to the high desert in California for another 10 months. And that 10 months was electronics training in radar systems. It was from math 101 up into every form of advanced math, calculus, differential equations, statistical analysis, mostly around waveform pattern recognition elements. The schools at the time were almost all tube theory because radar still is tubes for the amount of energy that in the end it's these massive tubes. So got done with those schools and went to my duty station. I was trained on a radar set called a UPS-1, and I forget what letter was at the end of it, but it was not computerized. It was all electronics, vacuum tube, analog systems. So other radar sets had the computers connected. This one was a week or a month, or it just wasn't updated to have the computers to do analysis connected, but the fundamental radar sets haven't changed. They've gotten better, but they haven't changed. So that was the radar training, UPS-1, very big radar. It's air combat radar meant for supporting Marine Air Base, and it's just watching for low incoming aircraft is about all it does. So it sits there and spins fast and put a blip on the screen. It might put an identifier on the screen with it because of IFF information. Who knows? So you decide whether to shoot it down or not within seconds based on this radar set. So again, you're in a forward Marine Air Base, and this is one of the things that comes with a forward Marine Air Base. So that's what I was trained on about a radar, but what I was actually, the system I was trained on was a ground radar, PPS-6. And what that radar did was sat on a combat line and watched the woods. And a very good operator, listening to terrible sounds for hours on end, could all of a sudden pick out people walking in the woods. So this radar was a lot lower power because it ran off of batteries. And it was backpackable and had a tripod. But the challenge with it is the operator had to be very well trained, and the training meant you had to have a good amount of time on it and some practice, and it took tuning, and if the weather changed, the tuning changed, so you had to go back to the device and maybe retune it. But the biggest challenge, besides a person having to hear these very, very subtle, when a person walked in front of this, you would hear a sound like corduroy pants. So you're listening to tree branches move, and you can watch a tree move in the distance and hear the radar sounds change with that huge tree moving. But you're looking mainly at ground level. You're looking for, if a vehicle's coming, you'll hear that is a Doppler shift, Doppler change, or if it's going, you'll know it's driving away from you. To some degree, you can discern a size, but it's all audio. There was no visual component to this radar. So, but the major flaw in it was a first target for the enemy because it had to sit up line of sight. So somewhere was a box the size of a UPS package, sitting on a tripod, and no matter how well camouflaged, shit happened. It had to be open. You couldn't put something in front of it to block the front view for the types of system it was. So shortly after I was deployed or got to my final duty station in North Carolina, that radar set, the PPS-6, was stopped. They had a new version. It had the same problems and issues. It was smaller, much more backpackable, and it was better. But this type of radar had a long ways to go, and I hope it has gone somewhere, because it did detect troop movements. It did have some successes, but not enough to make it worth. Like I said, they become a target, and once the enemy learned about them, they knew you had to go up there and tune something once in a while. So they might just take it out, and then you can't get another one. You might have a spare, and they take that one out in a little while. So now you're blind again anyway, and you just wasted a resource in packing in something that didn't do you any combat good. You would have been better off with ammunition and binoculars. But it did take a long time to learn that, because the idea is very good. So there's a little bit of radar training, but when they canceled that type of radar, that ground radar system, my MOS became obsolete. So I could have transferred to some other radar sets or systems, but I had the opportunity to go to metrology schools. So now I've got 700 or 800 hours of radar systems. I was out in the field for a year, deployed with the 6th Marines. And so those were combat units that taught other combat units and did good things. Did what Marines do anyway. Did it very well. So the second set of schools I went to was calibration schools. And these schools were out in Denver, Colorado, and it was before they had moved all the schools down south. So there was still a lot of different classes being held in Denver at Lowry Air Force Base, and all the services went to these schools for training. So they were really Department of Defense schools, not necessarily Air Force schools, but the certificates are Air Force certificates. So that was another 4 months of electronics, only it was instrumentation, mechanical calibration, certification, electronics, optical, and many other types of measurement devices. So these might have been, shipborne radio systems that had to be calibrated at some point, had to be certified, and usually a radio technician would work on that. But we had the skills and the training past that, because going through the radar, we went through waveforms, antenna types, antenna shapes. We did high AM, FM signals. So that's the electronics background. So after that, I went to community college and have 100 and some odd credits in a community college. If I have 3 or 4 different courses, would finish an associate's degree in different, and it wasn't necessary. That associate's degree wouldn't have done what my SUM training already offered me. So I went to work. And there, because of my training, because I did have some college education, I was given some privilege with positions and position names, not having an official degree, but having, like I said, all the paperwork and the skill sets and the interview skills. Got me through a career in industry and industrial training that's another thousands of hours of industrial electronics. If I've learned 50 programming languages, that would be a reasonable estimate, because they're all system specific, proprietary, bus proprietary, hardware proprietary, Intel versus Motorola type of proprietary, communications from current loops, RS-232, 422, PID control, current loops, optical communications. So industrially, I've worked in any industry that you can name professionally, and was a peer in most all cases. So that's way too long on my educational background, more than I kind of needed to share, but it gives you an idea of the depth of training I've had to be able to talk to some of these issues and ideas and concerns. And having worked with Fortune 100 companies for most of my career, the perspective is just different. It's large systems. It's large cohesive systems with feedback loops and mechanisms built into processes that all involved humans, large numbers of humans. So cheers. Too long.